today's segment, we'll talk about the culture, its meaning, characteristics, and functions. What is culture? Sometimes an individual is described as a highly cultured person, meaning thereby that the person in question has certain features such as his speech, manner, and taste for literature, music, or painting, which distinguish him from others. Culture, in this sense, refers to certain personal characteristics of an individual. Sometimes culture is used in popular discourse to refer to a celebration or an evening of entertainment, as when one speaks of a cultural show. In this sense, culture is identified with aesthetics or the fine arts such as dance, music, or drama. Culture is used in a special sense in anthropology and sociology. So, in social sciences, there are other definitions about culture. First is it refers to the sum of human beings, life ways, their behavior, beliefs, feelings, thought, and it connotes everything that is acquired by them as social beings. Culture has been defined in a number of ways. So, according to a British anthropologist, Edward Taylor, he defined culture as that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. Some writers who add to these definitions define culture as other capabilities and habits such as language, the techniques for making and using tools. Culture consists of all learned normative behavior patterns, that is, all shared ways or patterns of thinking and feeling as well as doing. Some of the thinkers include culture only the non-material parts. For instance, Sutherland and Woodward say, if culture exists only by the communication, then the content of culture can be ideas or symbol patterns. Culture also is then an immaterial phenomenon only, a matter of thoughts and meanings and habits, and not of visible and touchable material things or objects. The material elements that are made and used in accordance with socially inherited tradition should be called culture objects. Others include in culture all the major social components that bind men together in society. As a British anthropologist, Malinowski included inherited artifacts, implements, and consumer goods and social structure within his definition of culture. Some of other important definitions of culture as follows. According to MacLever, culture is the expression of our nature in our modes of living and our thinking. Intercourse in our literature, in religion, in recreation and enjoyment is a culture. According to E.A. Hobel, culture is the sum of total of integrated learned behavior patterns which are characteristics of the members of the society and which are therefore not the result of biological inheritance. According to Burstead, Culture is a complex whole that consists of everything we think and do and have as members of society. Culture is the total content of the physiosocial, biosocial, and psychosocial universe man has produced and socially created mechanism through which the social product operate, according to Anderson and Parker. Mlynowski defines culture as the handiwork of man and the medium through which he achieves his ends. And according to H.T. Mazumadar, culture is the sum total of human achievements, material as well as non-material, capable of transmission sociologically. Example, by tradition and communication, vertically as well as horizontally. Combining several of these definitions, we may define culture as the sum total of human achievements, the total heritage of man, which can be transmitted to men by communication and tradition. It is a way of life of the people in a certain geographical area, a lifestyle and social pattern of society being the direct consequence of accumulated heritage of ages past, distinguish and differentiate one community from another. Culture, therefore, is moral, intellectual, and spiritual discipline for advancement in accordance with the norms and values based on accumulated heritage. It is imbibing and making ours own the lifestyle and social patterns of the group one belongs to. And culture is a system of learned behavior shared by and transmitted among the members of the group. Culture is a collective heritage learned by individuals and passed from one generation to another. Next is the characteristics of culture. So first is culture, learned behavior. So not all behavior is learned, but most of it is learned. Combining one's hair, standing line, telling jokes, criticizing the president and going to the movie, all constitute behaviors which had to be learned. Sometimes the terms conscious learning and unconscious learning are used to distinguish the learning. For example, the ways in which a small child learns to handle a tyrannical father or a rejecting mother often affect the ways in which that child, 10 or 15 years later, handles his relationships with other people. So, second is culture is abstract. Culture exists in the minds or habits of the members of society. Culture is the shared ways of doing and thinking. There are degrees of visibility of cultural behavior ranging from the regularized activities of persons to their internal reasons for so doing. Third is culture is a pattern of learned behavior. The definition of culture indicated that the learned behavior of people is patterned. Each person's behavior often depends upon some particular behavior of someone else. That point is that as a general rule, behaviors are somewhat integrated or organized with related behaviors of other persons. Fourth is culture is the product of behavior. Culture learnings are the products of behavior. As a person behaves, there occur changes in him. He acquires the ability to swim, to feel hatred towards someone, or to sympathize with someone. They have grown out of his previous behaviors. Next is Culture includes attitudes, values, knowledge. There is a widespread error in the thinking of many people who tend to regard the ideas, attitudes, and notions which they have as their own. It is easy to overestimate the uniqueness of one's own attitudes and ideas. When there is agreement with other people, it is largely unnoticed, but when there is a disagreement or difference, one is usually conscious of it. Your difference, however, may also be cultural. For example, suppose you are a Catholic and the other person a Protestant. Sixth is culture and also includes material objects. Man's behavior results in creating objects. Men were behaving when they made these things. To make these objects required numerous and various skills which human beings gradually built up through the ages. Man has invented something else, and so on. And occasionally, one encounters the view that man does not really make steel or a battleship. All these things first existed in a state nature. Next is culture is shared by the members of society. The patterns of learned behavior, the results of behavior are possessed not by one or a few persons but usually by a large proportion. Next is culture is super organic. Culture is sometimes called super organic. It implies that culture is somehow superior to nature. The word super organic is usually when it implies that what may be quite a different phenomenon from a cultural point of view. Ninth is culture is pervasive. Culture is pervasive, it touches every aspect of life. The pervasiveness of culture is manifest in two ways. First, culture provides an unquestioned context within which individual action and response take place. Not only emotional action but relational actions are governed by cultural norms. Second, culture pervades social activities and institutions. Next is culture is a way of life. Culture means simply the way of life of a people as they're designed for living. Next is culture is a human product. Culture is not force operating by itself and independent of the human actors. Is an unconscious tendency to deify culture, to endow it with life and treat it as a thing. Culture is a creation of society in interaction and depends for its existence upon the continuance of society. Next is culture is idealistic. Culture embodies the ideas and norms of a group. It is the sum total of the ideal patterns and norms of behavior of a group. Culture consists of the intellectual, artistic, and social ideals and institutions which the members of society profess, to which they strive to conform. Next is culture is transmitted among members of society. The cultural ways are learned by persons from persons. Many of them are handed down by one's elders, by parents, teachers, and others of a somewhat older generation. Next is culture is continually changing. There is one fundamental and inescapable attribute, especially quality of culture, the fact of an ending change. Some societies at sometimes change slowly and hence in comparison to other societies seem not to be changing at all, but they are changing, even though not obviously so. Next is culture is variable. Culture varies from society to society, group to group, and people to people. Hence, we say culture of India or England. Further, culture varies from group to group within the same society. There are subcultures within a culture, cluster of patterns which are both related to general culture of the society and yet distinguishable from it are called subcultures. Next is culture is an integrated system. Culture possesses an order and system. Its various parts are integrated with each other, and any new element which is introduced is also integrated. Next, is language is the chief vehicle of culture. Man lives not only in the present but also in the past and future. He is able to do this because he possesses language which transmits to him what was learned in the past and enables him to transmit the accumulated wisdom to the next generation. A specialized language pattern serves as a common bond to the members of a particular group of or subculture. Although culture is transmitted in a variety of ways, language is one of the most important vehicles for perpetuating cultural patterns. Next, we'll talk about the functions of culture. Among all groups of people, we find widely shared beliefs, norms, values, and preferences. Since culture seems to be a universal human phenomenon, it occurs naturally to wonder whether culture corresponds to any universal human needs. So, here are the functions of culture. First is culture defines situations. Each culture has many sub cues which define each situation. It reveals whether one should prepare to fight, run, laugh, or make love. Second, culture defines attitudes, beliefs, values, and goals. Each person learns in his culture what is good, true, and beautiful. Attitudes, values, and goals are defined by the culture, while the individual normally learns them as unconsciously as he learns the language. Attitudes are tendencies to feel and act in certain ways. Values are measures of goodness and desirability. For example, we value private property, government, and many other things and experience. Next is goals are those attainments which are values defined as worthy. Winning the race, gaining the affections of a particular girl, or becoming president of the firm. Third is culture defines myth, legends, and supernatural. Myths and legends are an important part of every culture. They may inspire, reinforce effort and sacrifice, and bring comfort in bereavement. Whether they are true or sociologically unimportant, ghosts are real to people who believe in them and who act upon this belief. But still, it is part of culture. Culture provides behavior patterns. The individual need not to go through painful trial and error, learning to know what foods can be eaten without poisoning himself, or how to live among people without fear. He finds a ready-made set of patterns awaiting him, which he needs only to learn and follow. The culture maps out of the path to matrimony. The individual does not have to wonder how one secures a mate. He knows the procedure defined by his culture. So next is we'll talk about culture and society and its relationship. The relationship between society, culture, and personality is stressed by Ralph Linton. According to him, a society is an organized group of individuals. A culture is an organized group of learned responses. The individual is a living organism capable of independent thought, feeling, and action, but with his independence limited and all his resources profoundly modified by contact with the society and culture in which he develops. One must always keep in mind the interdependence, the reciprocal relationship between culture and society. Each is this distinguishable concept in which the patterning and organization of the whole is more important than any other component parts. A society cannot exist apart from culture. A society is always made of persons and their groupings. People carry and transmit culture, but they are not culture. No culture can exist except as it is embodied in a society of man. No society can operate without cultural directives. Like matter and energy, like mind and body, they are interdependent and interacting yet express different aspects of the human situation. So, I hope that you learned something in this segment. Thanks for watching.